Nice. Welcome to the Deer Shop Podcast, presented by Siman Brothers Outdoors and the Leaky John Boat Company.
Your track job was the first fun track job.
Oh, that was the best.
That kind of like, I think part of my life was influeed by that night.
Looking back on it, my biggest regret was opening day. I knew where it needed to be. I should have just done a simple hang and bang off the corner of that field, and he would have been toast. But I didn't.
That was our first public land deer hunting trip, and it went extremely well.
5 years ago, we couldn't shoot a deer at 100 yards with a slug gun. Now you're shooting turkeys at 100 yards with a shotgun. It was a 90-yard shot pass through.
And then you miss him 3 times with a rifle at 70 yards on video for the whole world to see.
Yeah, that's what Caleb did.
This is the first buck I've shot in over 10 years. And, not to get too crazy emotional about it, but like
10 years, no buck. All right, guys, Deer Shop Podcast, episode 58 today. This is one that I've been wanting to put together for a while. Anyone who's ever hosted a podcast knows how hard coordinating stuff is. But today we're going to talk all about food plots, specific to the Midwest, Northeast, our area of Ohio. You can use this in West Virginia, Pennsylvania. We have a true food plot expert on today who's from Pennsylvania, Jason Say of All In Outdoors. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we've been trying to put this one together for a while now, but I mean, schedules are crazy, and everyone kind of knows how that goes. But I'm glad we're finally able to connect and get this thing recorded.
That's right. You started talking to me right in really go time food plot season.
Yeah.
That was a mess trying to get something scheduled. But all my plots are in, schedule loosened up a little bit, so it's a great time, and it's awesome time to talk hunting for sure.
Oh yeah, everyone's definitely getting amped up.
Yeah, we are coming down to the wire. We're about 4 weeks out from deer season. I think you guys start about the same time as us.
October 5th is our opening day.
So we got a week before you guys.
Yeah, I think we're the 27th of September this year. That's Saturday. But we're going to be hunting Kentucky in 7 days. Yeah. We're tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
So tomorrow would be the Kentucky opener, 1 week from tomorrow, and we will be down there hunting in Kentucky. Jason runs a rather large YouTube channel, and he's always kind of been – I actually didn't even find Jason on YouTube. I found him just on Facebook, social media. This guy posts the most beautiful pictures of food plots you will ever see anywhere in the world. And it kind of got some, there's a large trickle-down effect from that, but that's what got me to start noticing him. And then I find out he's from Pennsylvania, not far from we are. And I'm like, man, this is the guy that we need to talk to when it comes to putting in plots and just overall being an expert, because we put a lot of plots in, but I would not call us experts by any means. We just throw stuff in the ground and hope it works kind of people. So we're not good for giving advice.
Yeah, not really. But we've killed some deer over food plots, and we've done decent in the past.
We've done okay. We've done okay, but
we've grown some pretty looking food plots. I don't know if they're
we're gonna get into that later. But I'm gonna let Jason introduce himself. He can kind of tell us about his little journey here, and kind of let the audience know his background and do an introduction.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me again. Again, Jason Say, All In Outdoors. Used to be formerly Wired Outdoors, so a lot of people have heard of that. I run a large Facebook group called Food Plots for Whitetail on Facebook. We have about 230,000 members on there. Wow. I've been producing outdoor videos way before I was food plotting. I did Wired Outdoors. I started about 18 years ago that I've been doing this. My whole niche was going to be, I remember when I first went and looked for sponsors, and I said, listen, I'm not going to be on TV. I'm going to be all internet. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They said, you're nuts. It'll never work. And here we are, 18 years later, and it's kind of the model. So I was fortunate to get on board early and have a large, following and things like that. And the food plot just over the years evolved and just something I got extremely passionate about. And I think pretty good at, and we'll talk about this. And, one of my biggest things, and anytime I look at food plots is, I always ask guys what their goals are, right? And so when I talk, I say, if your goal, we're here talking hunting, right? My goal is shoot a big mature buck, right?
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm one of those guys that is that warm, fuzzy, feel good. I just want to improve nature and make something good for everything out there. And that's cool. Like it's part of it, right? But for me, I want to kill big, mature whitetail. And so, but everybody's different, right? And I ask, what's your goal? So today when I talk about a lot of stuff, you got to always take it into, and as a frame of reference here, that I'm talking, the strategies I use, and I've been fortunate here in Pennsylvania the last 5-6 years. In my county 2 years ago, we just did a documentary in this buck. I shot 165 inch in Pennsylvania.
It's on the TV behind us, or it's actually
Okay,
behind where your camera's recording from. I got it pulled up and I'm watching it.
And I hit him the first day of archery. If I'd have killed him the first day of archery, he'd have been the biggest typical buck ever shot in my county. The year before I shot 150, I shot 154. Last year I shot 146 inch 4.5-year-old in Pennsylvania. But, so like I say to guys, there's a lot of guys out there that give food plotting advice, but I say, okay, it's great to give food plotting advice. And you mentioned real pretty pictures, right?
Yep.
Like it's not about pretty pictures. It's about killing deer, right? And so like I get guys all the time, it's just pretty pictures for the camera, and weeds are weeds. Who cares if there's weeds in your plots? And we can get into that whole topic, but I'm planting a food plot for a reason. If I want weeds, I'll just go disc it up and let weeds grow. I want what I'm planning to grow, because that's what the deer want. So it's more than pretty pictures to me. But at the end of the day, food plotting is really about, shooting big mature whitetail. And over the years I've evolved, and I've gotten pretty good at utilizing food plot strategy to consistently harvest big mature bucks.
I love that you say you listed off the scores of your bucks, because we do a lot of hunting in Pennsylvania. We've done a lot more turkey hunting in the past than deer hunting, but we're starting to get into the deer hunting thing, and we like to run these little public land camps and stuff. And a lot of people, when we mention, well, this year, we're planning on, we're going to go to Pennsylvania and do like 4 or 5 days. Everyone's like, why?
Instead of Indiana, we're doing Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and they're why? I would never do that. All they got is 6 points out there. And I'm like, that's not true. Like, Pennsylvania has great deer, even on the public land too. I know you're hunting a mixture of private, I would assume mostly, but there are large deer in Pennsylvania. Our trail cameras have proved that. I think there's just that barrier of entry where people don't want to have to climb the hills and hunt the big public and find them. But Pennsylvania is a sleeper state for good bucks. And the APRs all that stuff that happened over the last X amount of years has helped all that.
It's been huge. And, and I'll just be honest with you, 100% on my opinion of Pennsylvania. Private and public's very different. I've 100% private. I grew up on my dad's small farm. Everything around me was farms. It's just what we grew up hunting. I really don't have any desire. I'm 52. I don't have the desire to go do what I need to do on public ground in Pennsylvania. But you're right. If you're willing to put in the work, there are big bucks on public ground. But the hunting I'm going to talk about is a lot different than probably the hunting you guys are going to do, right? You know, and that's just the difference between private and public land. But you're right. Pennsylvania, with them putting in the antler restrictions year in, year out. And I think I was listening to one of your podcasts and you had a guest on, he was talking about doe management. And I was like, yeah, good luck with that. Like, we have some issues with too many does, especially on private. There's definitely some things, but you're right. I tell people all the time, guys all the time, I want to shoot bucks like you're shooting. It's like, you got to pass up, those 3.5-year-olds, those 2.5 bucks, and some guys don't want to, and that's okay. If you're happy with the 2.5-year-old 8-point, cool, man. But you're not going to shoot the big one unless you're willing to eat that tag and get after it. But yeah, very, very different kind of hunting. The public can be tough in Pennsylvania. Have you guys hunted public in PA at all?
Oh yeah. Okay, we'll definitely get into that towards the end. Our experiences there.
And I can't help you out much with that. Like, I had a piece of property that bordered public once, but that was more or less it. I'm fortunate in that way that I'm able to hunt private ground, but very different kind of hunting. But you're right when you say I've seen some really big bucks pulled off of public ground. You're not going to shoot a big one every year, like that. But there is the potential of you get out there, you scout, but you're going to deal. Pennsylvania is the number one state for hunters per square mile. Yeah. Period. Like, there are no more hunters in any other state. So state game lands, you got a lot of hunters, you got a lot of competition. Deer get smart, they go nocturnal, so it's tough. But you're right. Pennsylvania, a lot of people sleep on it, and I see it getting better and better every single year. As evidenced by some of the bucks that I'm shooting too.
We like the public land hunting in Pennsylvania, but we're kind of like you when it comes to here in Ohio. I mean, we don't leave our 126 acre family farm, and then we got 4 or 5, like I call them leases, but they're permission pieces that are, 100 to 200 acres. We don't do any public land hunting in Ohio unless we're going to chase turkeys in the spring just for fun. There's some big grounds for that. But when it comes to our home state, we're like you. There's no reason for us to go tromping around trying to find this public land deer when we can do these things that we're going to talk about in this podcast to make our hunting better. You get to learn the deer. It's family land too, so there's something to be said about just the way it feels to hunt on land that your grandfather bought and
That's right.
your family name has been there. And that's why we love doing this food plot and stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I get from time to time, a guy will say to me, they'll see the bucks that I shoot and they'll say, oh, try and do that on public. And I say, well, come work with me all summer long. Right. And it's different. And I'd say, public land hunter, he's going to work hard to get a big buck for sure. But I wouldn't say I work any less. I'm just working on my own ground, and my summers they're busy all year long. From we start frost seeding, soil sampling. I planted every one of my plots in a mixture of buckwheat and sorghum this year just for soil health. It's a ton of work to do what you do, but I love doing habitat management. I love doing food plots. A lot of guys, it's not their cup of tea, and if you don't love it and you just kind of like it or you don't like it, it's not going to be for you for sure. But just different ways, and you work hard between the public and private for sure.
Yeah, we like both, but we do the majority of our hunting is on private ground, and that's what we really enjoy doing. But the public is a fun trip, a fun 2 or 3 times a year. We like to take our stabs at it, and it's a good time, but it's not our bread and butter by any means.
It's not our identity. Like a lot of people nowadays are making this mobile hunting and public land and everything their identity, and it's the cat's meow. And if you don't do this, you're doing it in an easier way than they are, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I see it and I hear it. Yeah, I see it and I hear it, and I tell those guys that's all well and good, but I look back even on my own, where those guys are, I instead said, hey, I'm going to save up money. I want to have my own ground that I can manage someday and that I can do things, and that's where I'm going to put my resources, because you're going to be in your 50s someday, and you're not going to be hiking 7 miles and dragging a 200-pound animal out of the woods anymore. And it's going to get rough for you. And I'm happy to where I'm at, man. I've spent years. I didn't shoot a buck on my property. I think it was for the first 5 years, and put a lot of work and made it the way that I want it. Now, but it was all that work that went into it. It's just a different way of working, but it kind of is disappointing to me to see guys have this battle that, you're not doing it right and you're not doing it my way. And, you see, you get into the whole crossbow. I've never shot one crossbow.
I knew you were going to say that word.
I don't care. I mean, in my opinion, I don't care. I have personal beliefs, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole.
Oh, we can talk about whatever we want.
I have my own personal beliefs on crossbow. I'd love to see. I love archery hunting, and I feel like I think most people will generally admit crossbow hunting is much easier than practicing with your bow and getting ready and things like that. And I feel like in today's society, kids will just naturally gravitate to the easier thing.
Oh, yeah.
And for me personally, I'd love to see Pennsylvania put in a 2-week crossbow season instead of just letting it be the whole archery season. That's just me personally, because I want to see people still try to archery hunt, because I think it might become extinct. But that's my own selfish reasons. At the end of the day, guy comes up to me and says, man, I'm whacking with my crossbow. I'm like, have at it, man. Like, I'm proud of you, and things. So everybody's different. I have my own ways I'd like to see things. But the point being is, public, private, at the end of the day, you and I'll get into a heated debate with somebody about something. We probably agree about 99.999% of things politically, like everything else. And it'll be one thing like, oh, you plant food plots, I hate your guts. It's like, oh, you do it this way, or, or whatever, or you're shooting a crossbow, I hate you, and it's like, man, guys, we're all kind of in it, and and if it's legal and it's ethical in your state, I'm happy for you.
So you're kind of speaking our language there with the crossbow seasons. Our area has no public land, so we're here in Northeast Ohio, like North Central Ohio. There is no public land. It's less than 1% of all land is public open for hunting, so it's all private. Crossbows and baiting are legal. So the big, huge debate in our area is the compound hunters that have nice farms and are planting food plots and doing all that stuff versus the crossbow hunters that are hunting smaller chunks of land, big feeders. A lot of them are hunting suburb and around the city. That's a huge thing here in Ohio. Every year you're going to hear about how we have 5 or 6 200-inch bucks killed, and 5 out of those 6 are killed within a half mile to the center of town
Yeah,
somewhere. They're all suburb deer that are getting
Lots
killed.
of urban hunting.
And that's the big debate here. It's the baiting, crossbows, regular bows, food plots. It's the only thing to talk about because there's no public land. All the rifles are the same. Everyone's using a 450 now, so it doesn't even matter about that.
Can you guys bait in Pennsylvania? I can't remember the rules.
No, you cannot bait in Pennsylvania.
Can you bait up to the season starting?
You can a month before, 30 days before. If you're putting corn out, you can't. You have some really weird stuff too. Like if you're using minerals and there's any minerals in the ground, which that's where it goes.
Yeah.
You can get pinched for baiting. I mean, there's some really weird things. Like I don't use any minerals. We're doing what I'm doing, which sucks because minerals are really good for the deer. Like they're good for
that's something we utilize
a lot. Yeah, and I used to, but I'm paranoid, especially now shooting the bucks, that somebody can come in and dig up a place where I had minerals, even though those minerals weren't out, they get into the ground, right? That's what they get. That's why you see the deer dig them up.
Yep.
So you got to take a backhoe in to dig it out to be legal. So I don't even put minerals out anymore. And you're not allowed to bait. And I'll give you my opinion on baiting. I've been in states where there's been baiting, and everybody who grew up a certain way hunting, that's the way they like to hunt, right? So personally, in my opinion, I hope Pennsylvania never goes to baiting. I'm cool with it. Like, but people are like, oh, you plant food plots. Well, yeah, I'm cool with that, but I don't want you to bait, right? It's there's no, it's all well and good. It's just my own personal preference. But you guys know a lot of times, you get in a baiting state, it's a corn war, right? Like who can put out the most
money?
corn?
It's all about money. Whoever has the most money is killing the deer.
We talked about this many times.
Yeah, and so to me in Pennsylvania, I hope that we never, and I don't see it happening anytime soon, especially with CWD and different things like that.
Yeah.
And,
you guys should be pretty safe.
I don't think we're doing it. But again, I'm not knocking states that do it, because the one thing I realized when I started early, I was hunting in Kentucky, and I remember and was down there, and I kind of put my nose like, I don't want to hunt over bait. They didn't have anywhere. I mean, everything was over bait, and I kind of rubbed the guys the wrong way, and I didn't mean to. But I realized, like, I got kind of out of my bubble that, okay, this is just the way they hunt down here.
Yep.
Right. Like, because I don't do it, and, I don't have to do it, but like, I don't have to put my nose up at it either. Right. It doesn't make me any or anything like that. So I kind of learned early on, I don't judge a guy if it's legal in your state. Personally, I hope it's never legal in Pennsylvania, just because I like hunting the way it is, but that's just because I'm getting old and set in my ways. It doesn't mean one's right or wrong, but but for me, I hope we never go to a baiting state.
You go to any sporting goods store in Pennsylvania, and there's pallets and pallets and pallets of deer corn.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because I talk to I have some friends at Big and J and different things like that, and what do you think their number one state is?
Oh right, yeah.
Pennsylvania,
Indiana's the same way.
And a lot of people are buying those after October. So what are they doing with those, right? But go ahead.
Does that ever make you sad? Like, that there are so many people around you that have a blatant just disrespect for what the law is, and it's not going to change. When there's that much being sold, it's so cultural that there's no way you'd be able to change it, even though it is illegal. How are they selling all these pallets of corn? It's not to the cattle farmers, that's for damn sure. So guys are baiting everywhere. It's just, I don't know. When I think about stuff like that, that's what makes me sad about Pennsylvania. Ohio here, it's legal, so there's nothing you can do about it. But in Pennsylvania, that some of your neighbors are probably trying to steal those deer off your food plots with giant piles of corn.
They are. And I have good neighbors that I get along with, and I know some of them put them out. I know that it happens, and I mind my own business, right? Like I don't, like it's disappointing to me. I try and set my property up accordingly, and the nice thing with my property, we'll talk about this later, is, I have all the cover. And that's a huge deal, so I can kill those big bucks because I can set my stuff up that, man, those big bucks are going, how can I get between where they're going to go? And I've been pretty successful, but yeah, it's disappointing, but I used to lay awake at night banging my head off the wall, worrying about what everybody else was doing. I just kind of now, hey, I'm not gonna, it is what it is. I know a lot of people do it, and I do think it's kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, I'm not going to judge somebody. I've walked across a property where good buddy lets me cross, and I see the corn laying there, or the mineral site that's like 5 feet deep, right? You
got to choose your battles and that stuff,
Yeah, and it's like, hey, I'm just, I'd rather have great relations with my neighbors than give them grief over something like that. But yeah, it is just wish nobody did it, but it is. I think there's people wish I didn't food plot, whatever.
I was going to ask about that because You said you hunt primarily private land. The biggest enemy when it comes to public land is those other hunters coming into the spots that you're hunting. The biggest enemy when it comes to private land is your neighbors. So how have you been able to negotiate your neighbors? Are they a good thing to you, a bad thing to you? Are they shooting some of your deer?
Yeah, it's it was at first I got this property. It was about 18 years ago. It was a war, right? Because it was about it's different pieces. There's a parcel. It's 500 acres altogether, but they're in between. They're not all together, right? And so everybody treated it. The landowner before didn't even live there, so there was 4-wheeler trails. It was recreational USA. Everybody hunted it. I mean, when I got it, it was a battle, man. And I quickly realized, I was the nice guy for about the first 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And this was much with my neighbors. There's two different things. My neighbors, I do everything I can to have really good relationship with my neighbors. The last thing you want to have is I need to go get a buck and we can't go over there, And so fortunately I have one neighbor that just from the get-go is just a jerk. I don't get the rest of them, great relationship. I mean, there's times of the year they have kids. I'll be like, hey man, I'll take your kid in. I've done everything I can to build those relationships that I can when at all possible with the neighbors. When it came to people who just trespass, I started ringing them up. I realized I got to myself, and it's not fun going to court. Nobody likes to do that. Nobody appreciates it. But what I realized was all these people I'm trying to be nice to don't give a shit about me, right? Like they know I'm doing this for a living. They know this is how I'm feeding my family. Like I'm beyond like just your recreational hunter. I like make my living from sponsors and I spend a lot of money to get this land to support my business. They don't care about me, right? And that's why I just point so I started ringing people up, and once that happened, it stopped, right? But it took you being a really big jerk, and I wasn't a jerk. It was just, it got to a point like, listen, where you're at, you're not allowed on here, and you could care less, and we're going to do this the hard way now. I mean, caught one kid 3 times. Yep. He was a 16-year-old kid, and I felt bad. But I'm like, this was the 3rd time. It's like, okay, now we do it the hard way, man, and that's unfortunate. And, what I found out was when and this is unfortunate, it's just today's world, when you start being a dick, then people respect you more too. Like they're like, don't go on, don't mess around.
Yeah, they know not to go over there.
Yeah, they know like he's not gonna mess with you anymore, and unfortunately that's what it took. And now with cell cams and things like that, everybody knows, I'm sponsored by Moultrie, so I have about 50 cellular trail cams that sit on my property, and everybody knows it. So you gotta be pretty ballsy now going in and walking across somebody's ground with cellular trail cams and things like that. So I'm not bragging about that. Doesn't make me happy to say, oh man, it stinks. But I realize when you're a private landowner, you get a new piece and it's like that, it's tough. Most people, you got to eventually ring a couple people up till they get the picture. And it's an unfortunate part of it, but it's what happened. And now I don't deal with it anymore. It's pretty good.
We've found that the biggest issue is actually not other hunters. Other hunters, even if they're going to be the kind of the trespasses, they know what's going on and how to mitigate that, and what how to be deceitful. The biggest thing is people who don't understand because they're not outdoorsmen. They're just we have a campground that's by us, so we got people that wander way off the campground property, walking their dogs in October through thickets. They don't realize the damage that gets done in that situation. I'm sorry, it was a nice day, we're walking our dog. I'm like, oh my God, that buck was using that area, now he's gone. But I can't get overly mad because they don't understand. Now I always talk with we always talk with the owner of the campground, and it has been cleaned up, which is nice. I try to befriend all the neighbors, and I have a good relationship with most of them that have sizable pieces that are hunting and stuff. There are some that it's just hard to get in communication with, or we never see them out, and I'm not going to go way over and above and beyond if they're not that big into deer hunting, because then they're going to think I'm a nut job. But I do try to hold a good relationship with most of our neighbors, same as you. But
yeah,
it's tough waters to kind of mitigate. But I'm going to get into some of my questions here so we can kind of start getting into the meat and potatoes. And the first one I wanted to ask you about is, you got a guy who buys 10 acres, and in the back of that 10, he's a deer hunter with some knowledge, but not crazy about it. He's never bought anything for food plot, anything like that. He's got a 1/4 acre clearing in the back with a 4-wheeler trail going to it, and he wants to plant a food plot, and it's April or May, spring is coming. What should that guy do to maximize his success that year with limited equipment?
Yeah. So I think it's two parts of the question. I'll get into the limited equipment part second. Guys got an opening, and I'm just going to talk about me personally and my own food plotting journey. And that's kind of how where I first started. I got a piece of ground, and it's like, okay, I got an opening over here. I'm going to put a food plot here, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to put a food plot here because, I have limited equipment, and I can do this and I can do that. What I tell guys is you need to be careful with going with that strategy. Because if we come back to your goal ultimately is to shoot mature buck. If you say, hey, I just want to kill deer, like does, little bucks, I don't give a crap. Okay, man, just slap a food plot wherever, right? But if you want to set your property up and have a strategy to consistently kill mature whitetail, then you really need to think long and hard. Okay, I'm just going to throw a food plot in here because I have an opening. And I did that when I first started. And I remember I put it right. I was almost out in the middle of a field, man. We saw all kinds of deer the first night. Second time we hunted, we saw a little less. Third time by four, we didn't see jack squat. It's because our exit was wrong. Our exit was wrong. Everything was wrong about it. Like, we couldn't hunt it. And I literally looked and I'm like, man, we could have put that food plot 100 yards down there, right on that tree line, come in from the side. We don't go through right into the bedding. We can get in and out. We have a great entrance and exit. And I can go in there every time. I can get into that food plot with the deer in the food plot and get up in my stand and not have them catch me. So like what I tell guys is, and you're talking about a scenario, where they have a small property. So maybe your options are limited and it's just what you got to do. But before you start going and just throwing in food plots, because you may need to let that grow up and be cover, to tell you the truth. Like it might not be the right place to put a food plot. You might say, hey, I got food all around me. I got soybeans and corn. I'm going to select cut or clear cut some of this, and I'm going to just let my property grow up thick and gnarly and nasty. And I'm going to hunt the edges on the neighbors' fields where they're going to whatever. You get what I'm saying? Is so like I'm careful to say, hey, you got an acre opening, a quarter acre opening, go and put. Then here's how you do it and do this. Like think about your strategy overall, like how you're going to get into that food plot. Where are the deer bedding? Where are the deer going to? Right. And most of my property, I have no corn or soybeans on any of my property. I'm surrounded by it. But you know what I do have? I have the cover. I have where all the deer want to bed. So my strategy and everything that I look at, and I do a lot of property consulting. I'm not trying to do a shameless, but I go and look at people's property and tell them how to set up their property, how I would do this for the long term if your goal is to shoot big mature whitetail. And for me, the strategy is an outside in, right? Like I'm going to leave that middle. I'm going to try and make that my bedding area where I never go in, right? It's thick, it's gnarly, it's nasty. And I'm going to hunt these edges where I can put a 1/8 of an acre food plot, quarter acre food plot in between the cover and the destination food, right? Where's the destination source? Where are they going for the night? Okay. They're hitting these cornfields and okay, here's the bedding. Here's where I want my food plot. Here's my entrance and my exit. Zip, boom, bam. When I started paying attention to those little things, you know what? I started shooting a lot more big bucks, just willy-nilly putting in a food plot. So, just something I wanted to throw out there. And I will answer your question of like, a guy is in that scenario, doesn't have cover, has an opening, definitely wants to put a food plot in there. There's no questions about it. And I'll talk about how I'll do that and what I would do. But I would encourage guys to not look at food plotting as okay, we can just put food here. We're going to put this. We're going to do this. What is your strategy? How are you going to kill that big buck? Right. And, like you'll see, I don't have a food plot over an acre in size. Most all my food plots are a quarter acre, half acre, 1/8 acre, food plots, but they're set up in between where that cover is and where those bucks want to go. And so like I encourage guys, now not every property is the same. You may have a property that you don't have any ag around you. You don't have any destination food sources, right? And in Pennsylvania, you have a high deer density. You might not be able to put quarter acre plots in without them just getting mowed down, right? The deer might just mow down that little plot. So then at that point in time, your strategy, you do have to look at like, hey, we need to put a destination source in to take some of the browse pressure off these smaller food plots. So there's a lot of different scenarios and things, but let's say, and I don't know if you have any questions on any of that stuff, let me know. But to get into your scenario, guy does know, hey, it's got the perfect spot, quarter acre. It's off the bedding area. It's right where he knows he wants it to be. And it's a good spot. He's limited equipment and things like that. What I tell guys all the time is when I started, I didn't have jack squat for equipment. I didn't have a darn thing other than a 4-wheeler. And I was begging and pleading for a guy to come and bring a tractor and do this and help me with this and help me with that. But I've done a lot of food plots, not a lot because it's not a lot of fun, but you can do it this way. I've done food plots with nothing but hand tools, where we went in with a hand sickle, or you can go in with a weed whacker and you clear it out and then you spray it, with the 41% gly. Then you go back in, and if you can get a 4-wheeler in there and take a drag and just drag it over and over and over again. We did it with garden rakes one year, where we just went in and it's called hand tool food plots. I'll send it to you, but man, it blew. It grew great. It was about an eighth of an acre. It was a ton of work, but it was in a great spot. We didn't have any equipment, and then as I evolved as a food plotter, it's like, man, if I could just get a little something for my 4-wheeler here, and then I got a tractor instead of this. And now I still do a ton of my food plots with nothing but a 4-wheeler and a chisel plow. So like there's all different levels of what a guy can do. You can do them anything from nothing but hand tools, but it's like anything with equipment. Equipment makes your life easier, right? And if you're a food plotter like me, one food plot led to another and another and another and another, where I'm planting 20, 30 food plots a year now, so you're going to see as you do that, well, you're not doing 20, 30 food plots by hand, unless you got a whole lot of friends who are going to go help you. You won't have the time or the energy to do it. But to do one food plot, you can do it with as little as hand tools, and all the way up to, getting a tractor and a set of discs.
What would you plant in that food plot?
Well, I kind of have a strategy, if it's a first year food plot, right? And I tell guys, I tell them this all the time. Your first step is a soil sample. Do a soil sample. And I know people say, I know my dirt. You don't know your dirt. I've been planting my stuff for 18 years. I have no idea what my soil sample is coming back. You plant certain things that are going to deplete certain nutrients. You have no idea what your soil sample is going to say. And a laboratory soil test is going to tell you exactly what you need for that soil. It's going to tell you exactly what you need as far as lime to get your pH where you need it to be, is what you need for fertilizer for specifically what you're planting. It's going to make it easy for you. So I tell guys, start with that. But if guys putting in a first year food plot, right? Generally, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, you're going to be dealing with we're not the Midwest, right? Planting food plot. Ohio's a little bit better than Pennsylvania, right? You have areas that have some pretty fertile ground.
Right.
Pennsylvania, where I'm at, it's all strip cuts. You look at those pictures, that's some of the rockiest, nastiest soil when I started. I took years to build up the soil and make it what it was. So for me, like, it's looking at it in that first year, you're probably going to be working on getting your pH to where it needs to be. So I always have a strategy when I talk to a client or even my own. That first year, now I use a lot of Whitetail Institute products, and they've been one of my sponsors for years. So I'm going to talk about some of their products and I get more into what's in them. But my first year, I'm going to plant a product called No Plow. Now, when I say that, a lot of people think, oh, you don't do anything, you just go throw it down the ground. No, I prepare the seed bed. I do all the things I'm going to do. It's just a product that has, and you'll hear this too, guys will flip out when they see ryegrass, right?
Yeah,
like they're going to go ballistic. And I tell guys, in a situation where your pH isn't great, ryegrass serves a purpose. And why does it serve a purpose? Because it's going to grow in anything. It's going to grow for you. Like,
it grows in the bed of the side by side when you spill a little
right.
bit.
Are there better things for deer? 100%. If I have good pH, I'm using oats, winter wheat, different things like that as my nurse crops and cover crops. But in that first year, kind of a foolproof is, we're going to plant this No Plow, which does have ryegrass in it, but it has a lot of Brascas. It has annual clovers. And generally what you find happens is those Brascas and annual clovers will grow up, shade out the ryegrass. The ryegrass served its purpose to take off the browse pressure, right?
Yep.
And then those Brascas, and I can send you pictures of my No Plow plots. You won't see any ryegrass in it. It's just beautiful Brasca leaves and things like that. But it's going to, if you have bad pH, that ryegrass is going to grow and the deer will eat it. It may not be the best thing for them. It may not be their favorite, but it's going to give you your best shot in that first year as you're working to get your pH up and where it needs to be. So for me, that first year, a lot of times is a product like No Plow. Then moving into the second year, as I've limed and my pH is getting corrected, I'm a huge proponent in diversity. If it's a 1/4 acre plot, I'm probably going to split it into 2 sections. And, one section is going to be a section of, and we'll talk more about Brascas and things like that. I love Brascas. Deer love them here in PA. They hammer them. We'll talk more why I think, maybe you guys are having issues. But a lot of times I'm going to plant half of it in a Brasca blend. I'm a huge proponent of diversity in blends. These guys that just plant straight radishes or straight, I want to plant diversity. And diversity is great for the soil, but it's also upping your odds. Deer are browsers, right? They're keying on different things at different times of the year. And I'll give you an example. I love a blend. Instead of just planting clover, I plant clover and chicory.
Yeah.
And the deer will just key on the chicory. They'll come and they'll nail it, and then they'll move on and they'll key on the clover at a later time. But you're upping your odds that there's something in your food plot that deer is going to be there in hunting season, keying on at that particular time. And it's really good for your soil to have a diverse. So I love to do sections. So half in a Brascas, half in a perennial blend. I use a blend called Fusion a lot for my perennial.
We've used that in the past.
Yeah. I'll plant it with a nurse crop of oats. Again, just great thing to give it a chance. A lot of times, clover's kind of a slow starter. So the oats really gives them something. But then you plant those Brascas for 2 years, but you need to rotate them then. So now you can just flip, right? And now you're practicing good soil management. You're doing the things to keep your soil. I've been planting my food plots in the same plots for 18 years. And if you don't practice good soil management, eventually your stuff's not going to grow. Yeah. So like you got to do that crop rotation and things like that. So as far as your suggestion, that first year as you're getting your pH up, go with something that you know is going to grow. As you move in and you've done the steps, you've limed, you're getting your pH up to that 6.5. Now you can really start moving in and playing with some different blends. But I encourage guys, I love to split things into sections and really have diversity in my food plot. So that's kind of my strategy and what I tell guys, that I would advise them to look at doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys fall into this trap where they're planting food plots because of what they saw on social media or hunting TV or a hunting show. They're watching it. They see this beautiful food plot that gets planted and this 150-inch buck comes out and they shoot it from their tree stand. And they want that the first year. And I tell a lot of guys, because they'll kind of ask, not that we're food plot experts in the area, but they know that we plant a lot of food plots. So everyone will always ask me, well, what would you plant? If you're going to plant a food plot first, what are you going to plant? And I start by telling them, your first year is going to be bad. There's going to be weeds. You're going to overseed somewhere here. You're going to find that there's a low spot that just holds water and is going to not grow. So you can't expect, the perfect Midwest whitetail Drury hunting food plot in year one. You can get there eventually, and you're going to have to keep at it. But that first year is going to be rough. It's going to be real rough.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that a lot of guys have a hard time with because they think it could be plug and play because we live in the area where people are baiting with corn, people are using crossbows. They're not, you tell them it's a 3-year project. They're like, whoa, well, I might not even be able to hunt that farm in 3 years, because it's permission piece or whatever. And it's hard for them to kind of understand that.
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying. To kind of backtrack just a touch, you talked about the locations of the food plots and stuff. When you have large farms and diverse habitat, that is definitely, obviously, a major part of what you're going to do. You have to put the food plots in the right place. We find around here, and a lot of these guys, if they only have, like you said, if they only have 10 acres and it's a rectangle, and they have no control over what the neighbors are doing, and across the street is a 200-acre cornfield, they're going to plant something just so they can plant something. They want to feel like I planted my food plot, I shot my doe out of it, I got some nighttime pictures of the 150-inch buck cruising it during the rut. They want to have something that they can put in to say that they did it. And I like what you said there, the ryegrass, the no plow stuff. There's every company has their version of the deep woods or the low maintenance style plots. That's good advice.
For sure. Yep. I did want to say to you too, and I don't want to disagree with the host, but I disagree with on the one thing you said, of it being a process of 3 years before you're able to have really good food plots. You can have a good food plot in the first year if you do things the right way and you get your pH to where it needs to be. Now, if you go and you soil sample your plot and it's like a 4.2, yeah, man, you're going to have a couple years of building that soil. But let's say you go in and soil sample your plot and it's a 5.9 or 5.8. There's no reason that you can't have a good, now, other than acts of God, right? You don't get any.
We're in the middle of a huge drought here, so there's no rain,
Yeah. So you take all those things into account. But what I would say to guys is that I would not discourage that if you do the steps, and I preach this all the time, if you soil sample, if you lime and fertilize, 4 months before you're ready to plant to start raising that pH, if you fertilize with what it tells you specifically for what you're planting, if you're planting something for the pH that you have, in my opinion, if you get the rain that you need, and I say this because my first year, I remember sending my photos to Whitetail Institute, and they're like, "These are some of the best food plots we've ever seen." It was I had no clue what I was doing. They told me do this, and this, and that's what I did, and I've been successful every year since. And it was just simply from following every step and doing everything that they said. Are there things that can go wrong? There's lots of little things that guys can do. I've seen guys where, they said, well, I did this and I sprayed my plots and nothing grew. And it's like, okay, what did you spray your plots with? Well, I sprayed it with Slay. Well, Slay has a residual that nothing's going to grow in there. You have to make sure. You have to make sure you use the right herbicide. So there's little things that can go wrong, but if you are meticulous, my opinion is you absolutely 100%, if you can be successful in that first year and going forward, as long as you get the rain and stuff that you need, barring a drought and things like that, you can be successful. What I would agree with you on your point, and I don't know that you were trying to make this, what I do tell people is the guy that wants to play in a food plot and shoot that 150-inch buck the first year. What I've found on properties is they get better and better every year. Even if you have a beautiful food plot, I'll people say, man, at first year I had a beautiful food plot and the deer didn't hardly touch it. My belief is year after year, more and more deer, as those fawns grow up, they know that there's a food source there, right? Like it becomes a part of what they do. And you see year after year, I'll tell you this too. It's like anything. And it was amazing to me. The first time I planted Brascas, the deer did not touch them. I had turnips in my plot that were the size of volleyballs. And I called the guys and I said, hey, my plots grew great. They ate some of the greens, but they didn't eat these terms. They said, plant them again. I go, what do you mean plant them again? They said, the deer need to figure them out. They don't know what they are. And I said, the deer eat bark off trees. I'm like, this is, like, you're telling me a deer can't figure out. There's a huge smorgasbord sitting right there for them. They're starving to death in the winter and they can't figure out what it is. And I planted them the next year and it was like clockwork. And now the deer just pound Brascas. I mean, they hammer turnips, radishes every single year, but it took them getting used to it. So that is one thing. And I have talked to people I know in the South a lot, there's more of an issue. And I think they eat them, but it might be way after hunting season and things like that. But here in the North and Northwest Pennsylvania, and once they got used to it and they knew what it was, it is game on. So I think I agree to your point then in the fact that, you can, if you do the steps, you can be successful in your first year, but don't expect that, hey man, you're going to plant these food plots and it's, there's thousands of deer now on the property coming to your food plot. It can definitely be a process.
So I'm going to touch on a few of those things. We'll skip right ahead after I'm done and go straight to that. Was question 3 for me was, let's talk about the Brascas thing because it's a major thing. You hit a couple of the points that I wanted to talk about, but to backpedal, I think you're right. And I mentioned that middle of the night pictures of the 150-inch shooter buck come through your food plot, because if you think about that deer, a lot, here in Ohio, I don't know how much it pertains to your area of Pennsylvania, but a lot of deer have like a dual range. They have their spring, summer, their winter, fall. They go back and forth, but they spend time in these dual ranges, and they have a pretty large range. You plant this beautiful new food plot and it's perfect, and you plant it in August, and then by September, October, it's great. That buck hasn't been there yet. And he's 5 years old or 6 years old, and he knows he's going to come into the area when the weather start, when the days start getting shorter. He's going to move into his breeding ground, and he shows up and there's something new. There's just this huge open field now where there used to be CRP, or where there was brushy stumps and open canopy. Now it's a food plot. And they're going to, I feel like they are going to avoid that in daylight for a while, because it is foreign. It is new. They're 5 years old, and it was never there before. And they'll investigate it at night. And obviously during the rut, anything can happen, but they're not just going to walk out in this brand new food plot, the first day of season because it's perfect. Because to them, there's been a lot of change in the area. Trees are missing. It smells like tractors now. There's a brand new, blind that just got put up that hasn't been in the rain for 1 day yet, so it smells like plastic. There's all these factors that are contributing to why that buck's not just running out into your food plot and hitting all your mock scrapes and eating all night long.
Yep. I would agree with that 110%. Big bucks, my goal here in PA every year is a 4.5 year. That's a giant buck in Pennsylvania. If you can get a 4.5-year-old deer, you're doing good. And the thing I've realized in chasing them is you are 100% correct. And it can be, so talking about the dual ranges, the thing I've found is deer, sometimes these big deer are hard to pattern from day to day, week to week. But when I started looking at year to year, my biggest buck that I shot, in that documentary, I talk about, like, my buddy said, hey man, he was in this plot last year on this date. And I hadn't seen him. I was in the first night of season, and I didn't see him 170 times for him total that season. 70 different sits, morning, night. Didn't see him one more time. And my buddy, is the last day archery season. He's like, he was in that plot last year at this time. Sure enough, I went in there Boom.
Yep.
There he was. Same spot, same time. And I started then looking at trail cam pictures, and it's like, holy crap. Like, he literally, we could never get him down, but when you look day to day, month to month, when you look year to year, he absolutely 100. It's where he is comfortable. And they get old for a reason, right? They
Yep.
get old for a reason because they get comfortable. They know where they're safe, and that's what they do. And when there's changes, you're right. They're not going to like that, and that's another reason maybe in that first couple years until those fawns that grew up being in that food plot and feeding there.
Right.
And that's what I've seen them. It's just got better and better every single year with big bucks being on my food plots than it was the first couple years that I planted.
Yeah, that's 100% why I like to tell people, you're on that 3-year plan, because when you plant that first year food plot, your 1 and 2 year old bucks, they're going to be more apt to, they're going to be less cautious about it, and they're going to grow up knowing that food plot's there. So by the time they're at 5 and
That's
6, that food plot's already part of what they're checking in late October, where they're cruising on certain winds in November. It's already in their brain. They know it's there. They know the does are going to be there. They know where the does are going to bed in relation to that because it was different prior to the food plot being there. So you have to give yourself time to let the deer introduce that to their lives.
That's right.
So that's why I think a lot of people that are looking for instant success won't find it, and then kind of get maybe a little discouraged because, man, I did all that work and it looks good, or I did all that work and it should work, but I'm not getting results with the big bucks. I'm like, give it a couple years, you keep at it, it'll become part of their routine and things will be good.
That's right. Yep.
Do you have anything to add to that, Isaac?
I don't think so.
So let's just talk about Brascas. I'll skip question 2, go to question 3. Let's talk about Brascas. They're the most readily, people are either planting clover or Brascas here in Ohio. They're going to the feed store. They got the 3 or 4 major brands, and they're going to see clover and Brascas, and then some of the no-till stuff, as you call it, the first-time stuff. And a lot of people are going to plant those Brascas because of the way it looks on the bag. They tell you can plant it in August and hunt it in September. All these things. And they grow no matter what. We got Brascas growing in the barn in the complete shade right now, because the seed spilled out and they just get enough moisture and they start growing. But we have found that a lot of people get discouraged, and we have dealt with it on ourselves. And I already know some of the answers, but I'm going to let you kind of explain it. These guys, they plant these food plots and they look beautiful, and like you said already, nothing ate them. And then year 2 comes by, maybe they get eaten a little bit more, and they're thinking, man, I've been spending $150 a year on these food plots, and the deer just aren't using them. What would you say to those guys, or what would you do to make them more palatable? Kind of maybe go down that road a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you get in, so there is a palatability issue. If you said, hey, my question would be too, did they not eat them in hunting season, or did they not eat them at all? Right?
Right.
Did they not touch them? Because the thing I found with Brascas, and it's, if you knew every year what deer were going to eat at a certain time, and you could pin that down, you'd be a billionaire, right?
Yeah.
Because it's different every year. And I'll give you an example. About 3 years ago, we had a bad drought in PA, and we didn't have many acorns. Usually we're loaded with acorns, and there'll just be, I don't care. Your food plot's not going to compete with acorns when the acorn drop starts. It's just how it is. Your food plots are going to go dead, and usually the deer will start coming back a couple weeks later or whatever. One year we didn't have acorns, and the deer started eating the turnips at the beginning of October. At the beginning of hunting season, they were eating the turnips. That was the first one, because usually it's usually closer to that late October, early November where they start, and then really get on them in the late seasons for sure, when there's less food available and things like that. So, I tell people there's different scenarios each year, and you can never tell, okay, hey, I'm going to plant this because this is when they're going to eat it and things like that. We know that clovers and the chicories and things like that, they're generally a little bit better in that early season, right?
Yep.
That's usually pretty consistent. But again, that's why I say in your food plots, don't just plant a whole food plot of Brascas. Plant a section of clover, or plant strips, plant diversity, that you give them more things to eat. So, but anybody, to get back to that, is they're going to key at different things. That'd be my question to them. Did they not eat them at all? Did they eat the green leaves? Did they eat anything? And so they won't compete. If you have corn, soybeans, acorns, the deer are going to eat those before. But when those are gone, I've been in very few places in northern climates where once the deer figure out what turnips are, if your palatability is right, they will hammer them.
Yeah.
Like in the South, it's a different story. The South, it's they don't eat Brascas like they do here in the North.
And there's always grasses available in the South all year round.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I've had, once the deer figured out what the Brascas were and the turnips were, man, it's a no brainer. They're going to eat them. So, one is, I encourage people, don't bail on the first year, 2 years, keep planting them, but plant diversity, plant other stuff in your plot that the deer potentially key on, other than just saying, man, I was all in on all turnips and then they didn't touch them. Right. Plant diversity, plant your plot in sections, especially early on, until they get used to what they are. The second thing can be palatability. If the turnips stay bitter, if your pH isn't right, I've seen guys that have said, and this is more stuff that I've read, because I always work on getting my pH where it's at. I've never had problems other than the first year, but talking to experts are saying, if you don't get your pH right, you plant turnips and they remain very bitter, the deer might not like them. They're just not a preferred food source. Right. So when you're Brascas, make sure you do your soil test, get your pH where it needs to be. That palatability should be good, and don't bail out on them in the first year. Especially, again, I'm talking northern climates. In the South, that's a different story. Yeah. I encourage guys to plant more things like winter greens, which are more leafy. Just have the real small, what the deer eat in the South. But here in the North, man, I just can say, for me personally, I encourage guys, don't bail out in Brascas. They can be really good, but it might be a process in getting your deer used to what they are.
What I think a lot of people do, and they won't come out and admit it right away, but the way it works here in Ohio is, since we can bait, they're planting their quarter acres, of brassicas, but they're still running corn all year round until they stop hunting, and then they probably cancel their trail camera subscription. They stop baiting, so that once the hunting season's over for a lot of guys, it's a hard quit. Do those brassicas end up getting crushed? Probably more so, but when you're baiting corn the entire time you have your brassicas there, you're making it easier for the deer to get something they prefer more. So they're not going to your brassicas because you and also your 5 neighbors are also baiting corn, and that's a big draw away from why they're not using your plots. And then you hit the nail on the head with the acorns. I mean, right now we're experiencing it. We had our food plots are blowing up. In July and early August, tons of bucks. Everything's killing our food plots and our bean fields. The last couple of weeks here and in Kentucky, the acorns have started dropping, and it went like ghost town on those food plots. And you walk through the woods and see all the caps, and there's acorns on the ground. The deer have started hitting the acorns here in conjunction with their shedding, and I think the acorns pull a lot of deer off these food plots. And it's hunting season's getting close, so they're microanalyzing their spots, and they're mad that they're not getting a lot of action right now on their food plots that they've planted. It's it'll happen. It'll come. Those acorns aren't going to be out there forever. The deer will come back, but we live in an instant gratification kind of society, and unfortunately, to be able to say, you got to have a 3-year outlook on all this stuff is a lot for guys. But it's the truth.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, even your other blends of stuff, if the deer haven't had it before, it takes them a while to get used to it. It's not even necessarily Brascas. I mean, there's other blends and other things out there that you can plant. If the deer haven't ate it before, it's going to be a process. And, you hit the nail on the head. You hear guys talk all the time about the October lull, right? I feel like the acorns are dropping way sooner than they usually do, because usually what I find here in PA, that first week of October, I'm full steam ahead. My deer is still pretty patterned. And then we usually see the acorn drop and the deer disappear for 2 weeks, and people always say it's the October lull, the deer are resting up. No, it's not. They're gorging themselves on acorns and they're not moving, right? They're literally standing up and eating. They eat them till they get sick. Like they don't want to move. They're just not moving. And that, I feel like it's happening way earlier this year, because usually it's way earlier. So to me, what I've always found with the acorns is that they'll really key on them for 2 weeks, but even if there's still acorns in the woods, they move on then to eating other things. So the food plots will die for 2 weeks when they gorge themselves on acorns, but then activity. So I'm sitting here looking like, man, it might be a really good food plot year. Cause like as a food plotter, I cheer for no acorns. Like the years we have no acorn, it's awesome, like food plots. But when those acorns are dropped for 2 weeks, you can count on, man, it's going to be pretty dead. And I'm sitting here telling myself it's going to be new for me, but I'm anxious to see like, hey, if the acorns, and that's really what these deer are doing right now, which I think we all agree they are, man, it could be really good come hunting season that they're back on the food plots, at that point in time. So we'll find out, but I'm anxious to see.
It's nice with you got that large Facebook group, and we got a couple that we follow. it feels good if your cameras go dead and you start scrolling through social media and you have there's hundreds of other people saying, man, my food plots are just slowing down, or my mineral licks are dead right now, and everyone's experiencing the same thing. You can start to piece the puzzle together. Like, yep, those acorns are dropping everywhere. The October lull for me, we love hunting early October because since we have a larger-ish farm compared to the other landowners around. To me, the October lull is all of a sudden there's just people in the woods. They went from I'm going in the woods only on the weekend, maybe check my tree stand, check a camera here and there, to people start hunting during the weekdays and the season opens. So all these guys flood into the woods, and the added pressure and the winds and the smells start pushing the deer to some other places and making them move a little bit less. That's the October lull. It's to me, around here, it's human induced. Since we have a larger farm, the deer just move into ours. We've killed a lot of bucks between October 5th and October 25th. A lot of good deer have been killed in there in the evenings because they're getting up. They're using our farm to move through, hitting a couple scrapes, going out to food, as opposed to the small lots where there's a guy stacked up hunting, every 5 acres. Yeah. They're not going to walk through that. Yeah. They're just not going to tolerate it. So it does. Yeah. The October lull actually helps us here in Ohio. With just the way we're set up.
I've done whole podcasts on this, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about hunting the rut, but I'm a firm believer your best time to consistently shoot a mature buck is the first week of season. Consistently. Yeah. And I'm gonna talk Pennsylvania specifically because everybody, I think back to my early days. What week were you taking off work? Last week of October, first week of November. Now if I don't have a big buck on the ground the first week, I start to panic. I'm like, oh man. I got some work to do, and I'm going to tell you my thoughts on that. What I've found with big mature bucks, one is that early season, man, it's been some of my easiest hunts. I've had big bucks patterned. They're doing the same thing. It's before they're breaking loose. They're breaking out of those bachelor groups, right? Like, the big one, 165 inch, he was with his buddy, came strolling in the first Monday of season, walked right in. He could have cared less. I had does blowing out. He didn't have a care in the world, right? And that first week of season, you can really pattern a buck. And you get into the rut now, right? The rut, you need a little bit of lady luck, right? You can hunt scrape lines, you can hunt, things like that. You can do things. But, man, you need to be in the right spot at the right time. You need a little bit of lady luck. And I'm a firm believer in Pennsylvania. We have way too many does, especially on private ground, way too many does. And the big mature buck, they just don't have to move. They go from one thicket to the next. Yep. There's so many does that they're not. It's not like Iowa where it's a 1-to-1, 1-to-2 ratio, and they got to cruise. Those big boys got to get up and find the next doe. It's like, hey, I'm just going to move one thicket over, and here's the next doe. They just don't have to move like they do in other states. So I tell guys all the time when I look at a property, I put all my eggs in one basket. Man, and if I don't, last year, the buck I shot in the first day, I didn't have him till 4 days before season. I was in almost full-blown panic mode. I'm like, I don't have a buck I'm going to shoot yet. Like, oh my God, what am I going to do, right? And don't get me wrong, I tell guys this because who doesn't love hunting the rut, right?
Right.
When you grunt and bucks are chasing and they're chasing does. It's the most exciting time to be in the woods. But I still come back to, if I want to consistently kill a big mature one, I'm going to come back to that first week of October every single time for guys. And I tell them, a lot of guys put their, I think I was listening to one of your podcasts and a guy was saying that, he really, doesn't do a lot of hunting early season and it was his property. I think he was saying property and properties are different. Some properties are better rut properties. Some properties, depending on their cover and things, are better early season. But I set up all my properties. I'd rather have the early season property than the rut property, especially in a state like Pennsylvania, because now I need a lot of lady luck in the rut to get on that big mature buck.
So not to stop the food plot stuff for a second, but we've talked about this a couple times on this podcast. Isn't Pennsylvania's doe harvesting season and the way you guys can kill does, isn't it a little funky? Like, don't you have like an early draw system for doe tags, or what was that I was reading about killing does in PA?
There's all kinds of things. So you have red tags now that you can use and property, and they're trying to kill does, but I can tell you what the problem comes down to, and I faced it with myself on my own properties. You apply to certain units, and you have to apply at certain times. So like Clarion County where I'm from, the first round, everybody got one the first round, everybody got one the second round. Then you get into the third, like 2F, which is Venango County. It sells out in the first round, right? So like there's this round. So if you want to hunt 2F and 2D, I got to get 2F first, and maybe I can get 2D. And in some counties, like near the cities, you could get 6 doe tags total, So it is a little bit weird how they do it compared to other states for sure. And I'll get into the whole doe management thing because we talk about that a lot, because I get guys when I go to look at their property, they say, how many doe should I shoot? And if they're from Pennsylvania, and I just tell them, I'm like, listen, if you're on property like I am, I tried the first year I got my property, we shot like 20 does. I'm like, okay, we got doe problem. We watch TV shows and we watch this, and we're gonna thin the herd. We're gonna whack does. And we laid it to them, right? We didn't shoot a buck that year, but we hammered does. The next year we had more deer on our property than we had the year before.
Yep.
And all we did on our property was just burn all our stands. We're in and out, gutting deer, dragging them out. Like, big bucks aren't going to tolerate that. And I just kind of got to the point. It's like, man, if all my neighbors, right? If I'm a believer like you, if you don't have like 1,000 continuous acres,
Yep.
You're fighting a losing battle, especially on private ground. Now, this is why public ground, you won't see as many deer, because that's where the majority of the hunters are, and they're whacking them, right?
Yep.
They're shooting a lot. But in private, we got a real problem, and I don't know what the solution is, right? I don't know what the answer is, because I don't think you're going to get private landowners all to say, okay, yeah, man, we'll shoot 20 on ours and we'll shoot 20, trying to get them all together on doing that. They're just going to sit there and we'll let Jace whack all his. We'll those big bucks will move over into our side because they're putting so much pressure on there. So, there's a lot of issues in that. And that's just where I've got with my doe management. People like, I can't believe you're not, I shoot 4 or 5 does, and on my 500 acres, we probably shoot 6, 7, 8 does every year. We need to shoot 30 or 40,
right,
every year. And we don't, but it's just like, well, I want to shoot a big buck. I don't want to be piddling, with these does all year and just burning my property out. So it is a real problem. And honestly, I don't know what the solution is to it.
So that's, a lot of guys in our group, the way we hunt, it's the same thing. You have that one buck tag in Ohio, and you can shoot up to 6 does. If you shoot a buck, you can only shoot 5. Some counties have a little bit different regulations on how many per county, but it's open season for does up to technically 6 if you want it. Problem is that first week of season, well, I know this buck's using this bean field, or he's been out in this alfalfa, so I'm not going to shoot a doe because I'm hunting this buck. Then you get in the October lull, and they start doing all the October lull stuff like we talked about, pressure and acorns. The does just aren't showing up where you can shoot them. You're going all these hunts like, today's the day I'm shooting a doe. You got none in range. Then the rut kicks in. Who's shooting a doe during the prime of the rut, Then gun season comes in. If you haven't shot your buck yet, you're like, I got a gun now. So wherever that buck is, I'm going to be able to get him this week. So I'm not shooting any does and making all that noise so I can shoot my buck. The best thing for the does around here is for us to kill bucks early, and then we can just whack does all year round and not worry about it. But that's a perfect world. We're not the greatest hunters on the planet, so we never kill a lot of bucks early.
Yeah, if there was a year where we could all shoot our bucks early, we could shoot 50 does off our properties. But usually someone's still hunting come January, so we're not shooting too many does.
The more guys in a group and the more guys sharing farms and using it, hey, man, don't go in there and be shooting a doe out of that field at night. I'm going to hunt there this week, and you're going to drag the side. But, all those things start to factor in because we care so much about killing those specific bucks that more does live because of that than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't know what the answer is because we need to. We need to. I mean, for the health of the herd, I know I need to shoot more does, but I just come back to it all the time. And I've been fortunate because I shoot mine early season, but I always got a buddy, or I got this, or I got and when I set up a property too, I do try and set up doe plots, right? Yeah. Like, I take kids hunting where, hey, if I'm going to shoot a little buck or a doe here with a kid, I'm going to do it on this plot, right? Yeah. It's not right up against the thickest stuff where, I have plots like that. But even then, you can only go shoot so many, and then it goes nocturnal, right? Like like again, I'm hunting quarter acre, half acre plots. You shoot 2 or 3, man, that they're not dumb. Even does, they're going to go nocturnal on you. And I had a farmer one year. He had a 120 acre piece, and he's like, I want you to go in there and I want you to shoot as many does as you can. And he had a lot of does. I got 7, but I told him, he's like, you need to get more. I go, they're done. They're not coming out. Like it is what it is. You can only get so many at that point. So yeah, it's a tough call. I don't know what the answer is. I feel like I should do more, but at the same time, it's like, well, I want to hunt big bucks, and if all my neighbors aren't doing it, I'm not making a dent. I'm not even putting a dent in it.
Do you leave the guts in the woods, or do you drag the whole deer out?
We do.
So in your area, Pennsylvania, you're dealing with bears, bobcats, coyotes. all those
Yeah.
you leave all them gut piles, and you start running. Once you start running trail cameras, you start to realize you're leaving all them gut piles. You're bringing a lot of predators in at night. So now the deer can't feed in those fields at night because there's a gut pile laying right there with a coyote pack or a bear wandered through, and now he's kind of sniffing around, because they don't a bear don't forget. So they know where they found a gut pile, and they're going back.
I was going to ask just one little tidbit on that. What is your opinion on bears, bear hunting, all that? I know a lot of locals that we've talked to hate bear hunting, hate the bears there. What's your opinion on the matter?
If I could swear, I would. I hate them. Like
you are allowed to swear. This is the longest by far in the history of our podcast that we've gone without saying a swear word. So somehow we've made it an hour.
I freaking despise them. I mean, and they're big trash pandas, right? Like they don't like, back in the day before he was really serious about hunting. Oh, how cool to see a bear. And then they start ripping your garbage cans up. And I use a lot of blinds. I have a blind sponsor, so I'm fortunate I get blinds. But one year, people will look at my setups and I'll put blinds right on plots. I don't brush them in. I put them in a month in advance, and the deer get used to them. Like, and I've done it for years, and I don't tell everybody to do that, but it's worked for me. I had 1 year, the bears went through in one night and ripped 12 of them down. It's like 2 grand. I was like, so to me, everything has its place, right? So it's just a personal, selfish level. I hate them. They do kill fawns. They're just into stuff, and there's nothing that will ruin a hunt quicker. If I see a bear come through, I'm out. Like, you won't see a deer that night.
So you're not shooting a lot of bears though.
I don't. I mean, I've shot 5 or 6 bears in my life, but they all been in Canada. I actually have never went bear hunting in Pennsylvania. The way guys do it is they'll get like 20, 30 guys and they'll drive, and they'll drive River Hill and they'll do things like that. And that was a big thing with me is like, I don't want, I got a bunch of bears, but I don't want them pushing. It's still, in the bear season is the week before rifle season.
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to let people push off my whole property the week before rifle season comes in. So just get in this cycle, we could kill more, but I've never, now I get a bear archery tag because now you can kill them in archery season. So if I get one that strolls through in archery season, I'll let it rip for sure. But yeah, I've killed enough bears. I know guys love it and that's cool. But for me, I don't hunt them. But I hate them with every bit of my being.
See, it's a cool thing for us because there's no bears here.
Yeah, we love
bears here once in a while.
We love hunting bears.
Yeah, that's the way it usually is until you have. It's like the people in the city that love deer and hate deer hunters. Then they start eating their gardens.
Yeah,
then they're like, somebody please kill. They're eating my flowers. And then they hate them all of a sudden. Well, it's kind of the same thing with bears. Like, oh man, how cool would it be to have bears here? And then they show up and it's like, man, these things suck.
Well, we'll come try to kill one in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we're actually.
If I'm tagged out, we got a lot of them. I'd be happy to have you. Like it's just you don't. I mean, and so I could send you thousands of pictures of trail cams of bears. They're not easy to see. It's kind of like coyotes in Pennsylvania. In all my years of hunting, I think I've seen on stand 4 or 5 coyotes, and you hear them at night. You just don't see them. Bears are kind of the same way. In all my years of hunting, man, on stand in archery season in Pennsylvania, I think I've seen 3.
All right, so
3 total.
We got to interrupt you, Isaac. You got to tell your story.
Well, I went up to, it was probably near you, but a whole bunch of public land in the mountains 2 years ago, and that's all I was seeing was bears. But I was there 3 days after the bear season ended. So now I got really itching to go back just to shoot a bear.
So every night he's just sitting there self-filming these. I mean, they were 200-300 pound bears.
Yeah, the big bears.
They're hitting deer scrapes. They go up to every scrape and rub that a deer made. The bucks were making. They scratch their back on the rubs. And 30 yards from Isaac, 300-pound bear can't shoot it, and it was incredible. And the area we hunt, there's just we ran into them turkey hunting. Cows or sows with cubs. We're running into a ton of bear while we're hunting. So this year, we just decided we're going to go up there archery hunting, and we're there to kill a buck, but we're 50% there just to kill a bear in the woods with our bow. Because we're seeing so many of them.
And I didn't know. I thought the deer didn't really mind them too much because I didn't think they were taking down adult deer. But now I'll keep that in mind. If we're seeing bears, maybe we need to go somewhere else to see bucks.
Yeah, I mean, anytime I've had a bear come through or seen a bear or I haven't seen a deer. I mean, the deer, we have a lot around us, and you'd say, oh, I think they'd get used to them. I've seen coyotes cruise through and see deer then, but like bears, for some reason, man, if I see a bear, it seems like the hunt's over, you know, and maybe you do, and maybe there's enough of them there that they're more used to them. But we have a lot of bears, you know, and like in my acres, I know there's 7 or 8 different bears on my 400 or 500 acres that I have on trail camera. So, but yeah, in my opinion, they ruin a hunt quicker than anything else.
We'll keep that in mind for sure.
We deal with the destruction down in West Virginia. So in West Virginia, where we have a hunting camp, it's 180 acres, and we have permission on an additional 100 plus. So we're hunting 300 plus acres. You know, we'll check cameras 2 or 3 times a year. It's a big ordeal. We have a bunch of non-cells all over the place, and we'll just go down there in the summertime, like we're actually doing tomorrow. I'm leaving tomorrow morning to go down check trail cameras and stuff and mess with stands, but. You'll go down a ridge or a trail, and all of a sudden, the first camera on the trail, it's on the ground. And then, so you put it back up. You go to the second camera, it's on the ground. So, a bear comes through.
Or it's gone.
And just walks, just walks down the trail and just knocks every camera it comes across down.
Yeah.
We've had cameras go missing that we have found later. We had one.
That they drug 100 yards away just for fun.
Yeah, we had a camera on a mineral lick, and, that camera, the bears they find those minerals, and it's done. They'll dig down, eat it, and they'll destroy every camera that's in the area. Camera went missing. We looked around, couldn't find it. Later that year, my buddy Matt, hunting in that area, ends up shooting a buck. We're tracking the buck through the hills, and Isaac looks down at a creek crossing in this big ditch. Trail camera's just laying there on the ground. Last picture's a bear's face, right up against it. Carried it about 150, 200 yards.
Yep. I didn't even get into the or the trail camera damage that they do. But
I can only imagine.
About the blinds, but I mean they're awful. I despise them. I hate them. So,
speaking of the blinds, you're sponsored by Rhino.
That's correct. Yeah.
So do you know who your contact is for that?
I deal with a couple different people. There's Matt Peters, Thad Showers who handle some of the social. I deal with some different folks over there.
Because they're based out of the city that I work in Ohio here as a fireman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've been they're part of Faraday now.
Yeah. They might have sold from there, but the guy, I think his name's Dan Reeser, who originally started the company.
Okay.
Which was through what was their outdoor option? Mm-hmm. The outdoor option is what they called it. The Rhino blinds were based out of the city that I work in for a long time. So we have some of them too. I befriended a couple of the guys there and bought some stuff like that, just social media. But they make a pretty good product.
I mean, for blinds, for me, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't like hunting out of blinds.
Nobody does.
Stand. I take
nobody does.
I take a lot. I like the new see-through ones though. Like that changed it a little bit for me. But for me, it's kids. You know, like I said, you're taking a kid hunting. There is no better way than in a blind. They can fiddle, they can move around. So I take a lot of kids hunting. But I put out about 8 to 13 blinds every year that I can take kids out, and they're really effective too. I mean, you can kill a lot of deer out of them for sure. So
well, I filmed every hunt that I've ever been on since about 2014. I've never been in the woods without a camera since then. So I have to have some blinds because if there's days where the weather's shit, I'm still filming. So I'm going to film either way. And we always have spots set up here on the farm where we know if it's bad weather, at least we can get out still and hunt the drizzle, hunt the rain. A little drizzle, I don't care. I'll let my cameras get wet. But when it's snowing, torrential snow, and everything's wet, or there's a good rain coming down, but it's rut, you still got to be out there. I'm not going to let the rain stop me from hunting. So.
Yeah, we use them a lot in the late season, especially we're the idiots that still flintlock hunt in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you guys
I've seen some videos and stuff.
Yeah, Leatherwood's Outdoors, man. Everyone knows that they got their flintlock stuff.
Yeah, and I love it too. Like it's just a Pennsylvania thing, and so when you're using powder and you got to keep dry and all that, like blinds are very effective for sure. So we do hunt out of them a lot then. But if it's me and I have a choice in archery, I'm up in a tree stand. But as far as taking kids and stuff, we use blind.
It's kind of funny. You're doing the flintlock season, but you're hiding in a blind, probably wearing some Gore-Tex, and got a heater on.
Yeah, we're all about being primitive, right? I've had people bust my chops for you're going out with a 1776 flintlock, hunting in a blind with scentlock clothing, and it's like, yeah, man, to each his own, whatever.
All right, so I'll get to the last question I have when it comes to the food plot stuff because we've been kind of rolling here for a while. But if you had, and we kind of talked about it in the pre-meeting a little bit, if you had a 200-inch 7-year-old buck that's been on your farm and you know that he's going to be around and you need to plant something to keep that deer there, you have every farming implement in the world at your disposal. You can plant whatever you want in this perfect rectangular 1 acre food plot that's right next to a perfect thicket. Like you said, you have your access all figured out, but you want to plant the best mix or the best seed you can to kill him that year. What is it that you're going to put in? And you want, in your case, you want to kill him October 5th, so you can say what you're going to do for early, and then you can change it till mid or late,
Yeah, I mean, if I'm picking one blend that's like good early season all the way to late, now an acre food plot, I'm gonna put probably 4 different sections and put perennials and do a bunch of different things. But tell me, say you have an eighth of an acre food plot, right? So if I have an eighth of an acre food plot and I can put one thing in, it's going to be a blend like Pure Attraction, which has oats, it has Brascas. It's been just a great early season to late season. I'm starting to become a big fan of winter wheat as well as with my oats, some of those, and then you have Brascas and stuff in there. I mean, honestly, the clover and chicory blend, I'd probably want to have both in there. I'd want to have Pure Track, which is the oats and the Brascas, and then you have the chicory and the clover, and you just give him. And that's what I do in a lot of my plots is, hey, that's a great early season all the way into late season, right? Because you can never predict year in, year out, but that would be my go-to. I want to kill this buck. What is the blend I'm going to go with? Now, in each of those blends, there's 8 different seeds. It's not just 2 or 3. Right. There's 8 different things. Even in the chicory and clover, there's some annual clovers to give, to be a little bit of a nurse crop. I'll plant oats with it. So you got a lot of different things, but that would be my go-to strategy. If I said, okay, I got this big buck, he's 7 years old, he's here, I'm going to put a eighth of an acre food plot. That's probably what I'd go with. That'd be my go-to.
I like the chicory because I have found here in Ohio with our crappy clay soil and our droughts that we keep getting, that if you can get the chicory to start early when it's wet and moist and get a good base, it's pretty drought resistant. I feel like the clover tends to burn out. It'll be real short and it just won't have a good root, especially if you plant it in the spring and get a hot, dry summer. But the chicory does seem to come up no matter what. It won't look as big and beautiful and lush as it should, but right now we're in the middle of a drought when we got chicory in our food plots and deer still eating it, which is really good. The clover is a little bit subdued from what I would like to see. I know it'll be better in the future. Get that root first. Year 2, year 3 with that clover would be better. But I like the chicory.
My advice on that, and I got to this point because I used to be like, man, I got all these food plots. I'd like to get some in the spring and some in the fall. What I've found with chicory and clover is you are better off planting in the fall.
Yes.
It is going to establish better. You're going to have less weed competition. It establishes better for the next year because like what you mentioned happens 90% of the time. You plant it in spring, you're going to deal with dry weather. And that's going to stunt that clover. And then I found even getting it established then later, I'm working harder to get it, established then later than what I do if I just plant it in the fall. And so I tell guys when it comes to that, like, even though we say, I have lots of guys say, well, I want something in there, all year long. Right. And it's like, I get that, but man, once you get this established, you'll have that then for 4 or 5 years if you take care of it. So just a little advice for me. And like, I don't plant a chicory or clover plot in the spring anymore, and what you'll find is your chicory, you'll probably see it. It can, and it gets too big, it gets waxy and it can get a stem on it and things too. A
little purple flower and looks like hell.
It's not as palatable and things, and deer won't like it as much as what they will. The other thing I say with all your perennial plots, I'm a huge proponent of frost seeding. So plant that in the fall, plant your chicory and clover in the fall, then frost seed it again, then in the spring. Man, and you've seen some of my pictures. I have some of the best. And then do some weed control in the spring.
We mow ours a lot. We have the because we're on the farm, we have the option of actually getting in there and mowing ours. But some people don't. Weed whackers can work for that. That's a lot of work, but we've done it before. We have a farm in southern Ohio that we hunt. It's 100 acres. All we have is ATVs and hand tools. There's no tractor, no implements. So we're weed whacking those clover plots once or twice in the spring and summer. Just to keep that chicory, like you said, that chicory gets that stem, that flower. It's pretty nasty at that point. Yeah, it's no good.
And mowing, there was, being in food plots, there was this study that came out all of a sudden. It was like, you shouldn't mow your clover. You shouldn't mow your clover. I'm like, pound sand. I go, I said, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Now, like the guy who did the study and what they took it out of context was and I forget how he's saying, he's like, but the point being is mowing your clover plot, first and foremost, is one of the best ways of controlling weeds.
That's why I do it, is the weeds.
Yeah, it's controlling the grass and weed. The second thing is nobody will ever convince me the deer don't like that new growth.
Right.
That new, it's soft, it's tender. They're going to eat that, right? So
Yep.
to me, and I've been doing clover and perennial plots now for years, and I feel I have it down to a science. There is nothing better than mowing, as long as your food plot's healthy and you got rain in the forecast,
Yes.
right? If you're going to mow in the summer, make sure your food plot's really healthy, it's not stressed, and you got rain in the forecast. You get those two things, man, that stuff will blow up and you'll have a good looking perennial plot for 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
So yeah, like your point of mowing or weed whacking. I have a couple that I weed whack that you go in, you wait, and man, it's just one of the best ways to control weeds and also have just a great looking new tender lush growth.
Yep. Yeah, we love it. I did want to ask about one thing we kind of skipped over. I've read, speaking of studies, I read that there was a lot of people believe that once you get a good hard frost and cold, that it turns the brassicas sweet. And then I've also seen some studies that say that's just not true. That's full baloney, and the brassicas are the same all year round. What's your opinion on that?
All I'll say is there's something that happens, and whether it's there's less food in the woods and that's what they're eating, or it's more palatable because it became sweet, I don't know, because I'm with you. I've seen both those studies, so I haven't fought with guys because I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been able to tell. What I do know is when it turns cold, right? Like how I told you they were eating the Brascas the one year in the beginning of October, which blew me away because that never happened. But as soon as that cold switch goes off, those deer start eating those Brascas. So to me, I lean more towards there's something going on with that Brasca itself, and if it's sweeter, that's what's doing it, because they're keying on them, because there's still food in the woods. There's still the other food plots, right? The food's not completely depleted. There's still corn, but they are coming off. The soybeans are gone, right? There is less food that time of year. So I'd like to sit here and tell you I know 100% because I've looked at both studies and I don't necessarily disagree with either one of them, but I lean more to, as much as experience as I have with Brasca, something happens to them on that first freeze that makes the deer want to eat them more than they want to in the early season.
We've had the problem here in Ohio where it don't get cold. I don't know if you guys had that same problem. There are some seasons where it only gets below 20. It only gets in the
February.
20s, like late January, February when the season's ending. There's some times where it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I mean, think of that too, where I lean more towards that a hard frost does something to them because they don't eat them in the South. Like you hear guys from the South say,
right.
I planted turnips and they don't touch them, and it's like, yeah, it's probably not what you need to be planting. So what's the difference, right? And maybe it is that there's more things for them to eat that's it's at the bottom of the list, but I lean more towards, just based on what I've seen with deer, is you get a couple cold hard freezes that something happens to those turnips that makes the deer start to key on them.
Did you read that study? And I don't know if it was a study. I can't remember where I read it, but no matter what, even in places, even in Iowa where everything is perfect per se, the deer are still going to eat natural browse, 40% of the time, and they're going to spend 40% of the time eating whatever the major crop in the area is, and then that last 20% is your supplemental feed or your food plotting. I can't remember where exactly I read that. I would assume that that's different based on geography, because if you're in West Virginia, like where we have our cabin, there is no crops, so they can't spend 40% of the time eating in crops.
That's right.
But they still, I think the point of the study was that 40% of the diet, even in a perfectly controlled environment, is browse, is your twigs, is your low level stuff in the woods, is your bark, is your the stuff that we wouldn't even view as palatable deer food. It's the stuff they're eating around their bedding area during the day, and when they get up and move a couple hours around noon, that the stuff they're eating there still makes up almost half of their diet, even in a perfect condition.
It's very subjective. I didn't actually read it. It's extremely subjective, like you said. Deer are always going to go to a preferable browse source, right? And if you have a food plot, they're going to eat a food plot before they're going to start eating the bark off trees.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They start eating the bark off of trees when there's nothing left, at that point in time, when there's not a preferable food source. So my opinion is it goes like anything. Preferable sources are soybeans, corn, acorns, apples, food plots. You know what I'm saying? And if things are available, they might come to your food plot, which I have a lot of. Deer just come, and they're not there all night. They're not destination sources. They're just coming through and browsing, and they're moving out to wherever their destination source is going to be, right? So to me, that's an extremely subjective, if you're planting an eighth of an acre food plot, well, of course, that's not going to make up 50% of their diet. It's
Right.
going to be gone. And if they're looking at the whole year as a study, and I'm guessing that's what they are, what they ate over a year time frame, well, food plots are gone. So
Yep.
so now they're browse and things like that way more because the food plots are there for what, 2-3 months?
Yeah, depending on what you plant, right.
Yeah, and then they're gone. So you got all the other months of the year. So yeah, it's going to make up. But I think at certain times of the year, food plots are going to make up more, like the corn and the soybeans and things like that. It's not, they're looking at it over a year and it's very subjective.
Yeah.
That would be my opinion on it, because I can tell you that 100% a deer is going to prefer a clover and chicory food plot over eating bark off of a tree,
Right.
or eating cows at that point in time. So,
And the whole goal is to have them be in your food plots during season. So it really doesn't matter what they're eating in February or June or.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you do want to, there can come things into habitat management. If you say, man, I don't have many deer on my property, I want to hold more deer, then you're planning more to get them through the winter, right? Like, maybe you're standing corn, you're leaving 10 acres of standing corn up all winter long. Or, you get what I'm saying? There may be things you do from a habitat standpoint, but again, coming to me, there's plenty for the deer to eat around me. There's lots of things. I don't have to worry about sustaining the population.
Right.
Or trying to
That's
hold
the
deer.
same case around here. We don't have deer. We don't have deer starving to death in the wintertime around here.
That's right. 100% of our thing in doing what we're doing is those 2-3 months out of the year that we want to kill deer. The rest of it, whatever. Yep.
All right. I mean, we're getting kind of towards the end here. I don't know if you want. We didn't really get to completely touch on it, but if you had to talk about the equipment that is a must-have in your barn, you're going to be a food plotter. Maybe maybe you don't have $50,000 to drop on tractors and planters and all that. But if there was food plot equipment that you were going to have no matter what would it be?
Yep. So where I would start, like we said, minimum. You can do it with hand tools. You can do it with a sickle, a yard rake. You can do it as simple as that. Most guys are like, screw that. What do I need as far as power equipment that would get me through? I'd say if you can get a 4-wheeler, I put in a ton of plots with a quad. And what I put it in with is you're going to need, a sprayer. I would absolutely have a sprayer. They're relatively inexpensive, $100, couple $100. You're going to want to have a harrow, a drag harrow that you can drag with your quad. You a lot of times can spray and just drag, and get seed soil contact. I'm to the point with my quad. I have a great piece of equipment, and full disclosure, they are a sponsor, but I used it for 3 years before they were a sponsor, and it works so well. It's a Coons Engineering chisel plow. The problem with quads and groundbreaking equipment is weight, right? Like, and I don't want to bad other products, but like little sets of discs or even the Groundhog Max, like people just rip up their quads doing figure 8s, right, to get the brake, and they're just not really effective. Well, this chisel plow that I got, I remember I looked at it, I'm like, it just has these chisels. How's that going to work for me? And plus, it's my quad. I got a 500 quad. Is it going to pull it? And they're like, use it. And they didn't sell many of them, and they sent it to me, and I called them. I'm like, listen, this is awesome. They quadrupled their sales, and it's honest to God one of the best things I've used for a quad. Now, it's not cheap. It's like a few grand. It's like $3,000. But if you're not looking at a $50,000 tractor and a set of discs and things like that, and you want to kind of that mid-level, to have a groundbreaking piece of equipment. So I put in a ton of plots with a sprayer, my quad, a drag, and my chisel plow, and that's what I put in a whole bunch of food plots with, and that's in the grand scheme of things, a relatively inexpensive way to do it that you can really do a good job of putting food plots in.
Yeah, because most hunters, they already have either a quad or side by side. Generally speaking, that's already something that's in the tool shed. They have a sprayer of some kind. We have stopped using backpack sprayers because backpack sprayers not only a lot of work, but you're spilling chemicals all over yourself and walking through it and everything that has to do with that, looking long term. So we actually purchased a pull behind sprayer, like a 30-gallon this year.
It's a chisel plow he's talking about. It's a pretty cool looking thing.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that for gores.
Yeah, you'll have to look at my video. I did a video that went viral on it. It's on my YouTube channel.
This is the one?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
And it just demonstrates. I remember I looked at it, I'm like, this ain't going to work. It's freaking awesome, man.
How heavy is it?
It's not, but that's not what matters. It's not about the weight. It's because of how the chisels are shaped. So when you pull it, it digs because of how it's shaped, if that makes sense. It's not, you don't need weight on it. Like,
Well,
what is the
I
problem?
was only asking that because of transportation. So like,
It's
if I want to,
relatively
like, can
light.
you throw it in the back of a pickup truck?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
two people can pick it up.
Okay,
you know?
that's what I was getting at. Because
Yeah.
some of these guys, it's great that you have it, but now you got to get it down to West Virginia, and I don't want to get a trailer.
Yeah.
All that whole. But if you can throw in two pickup trucks, one with the quad, one with the chisel.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can get that in and take that down. The one negative I'll tell you about it, and I learned the hard way on it. With the chisels, they dig, right? So I have a 500 quad. I've broke new ground with it. I've planted existing plots. I've pretty much done it all. And the one thing that I learned the hard way is roots. If you're going around trees, slow down.
Yeah.
Because it will stop you. My nuts were on the steering wheel. I thought it was pretty funny. And I did it one time, but I was going like 6-7 miles an hour, just zipping along, and wham! I mean, you catch that root and you stop immediately. And I ended up on the steering wheel. That's the only negative, but it's real easy because you can control it from the quad. You have wheels that will raise it and lower it. So as you're going around a tree, just raise it so you're just barely breaking the ground. And once you learn to do that, man, it's a fantastic piece of equipment. And if you're looking at being mobile and looking at that mid-range type of solution instead of a tractor and stuff, and I use it because honestly, some of the plots I plant, I can just get there way quicker. And I can go just as fast, if not faster than I can with a tractor and disc, especially if it's been worked before. I can get up and work plots quicker than I can taking a set of tractor and disc to do it. It's a phenomenal piece of equipment. The one other piece of equipment I would say that I use a lot that I would put up there is you need that you can get behind a quad is a mower.
Yeah,
I've
seen your videos, the pull behind mower.
Yeah. I mean, I clear a lot of plots with it. I mow my clover plots with it. So that's one. First time you're going in and clearing, it's a lot better than doing it with a sickle or a weed whacker or anything like that. So a mower, is something I'd put near the top of the list if you can get. So you get a quad, you get a chisel plow, you get a mower, and you get a sprayer and a drag harrow.
Yeah.
Pretty much what you need.
Yeah, that's the one thing. We have a 6 foot or a 5 or 6 foot tiller for our tractor. Like a rotor tiller for the tractor, and it does a good job when you're planting these food plots on the farm. But holy shit, does it take a long time? You're just sitting there,
does.
low gear,
1 mile
one
an
or
hour.
two. I mean, you are just creeping along for hours tilling up that ground.
Yeah, the other thing I'll warn you about tillers too. One is I deal with a lot of rocky soil. Not fun. With
No.
a tiller. It works for a lot of my places, and my battery's going low here. I apologize. So
No, you're fine. We are getting towards the end. So.
Yeah, I just got a warning, but I'll tell you what the tiller that you need to be careful of, and I learned the hard way. I got a tiller and I was like, man, this is a great seed bed. This is unbelievable. This is fantastic. In the first year, it grew great. The second year, it didn't grow as well. And the third year, it didn't grow at all. And what I found out, I was just pounding my soil. I was turning it to powder and I got hard pan.
Yep.
So like turn it at the same distance if you don't turn that over with a plow, you'll get hard pan. Your stuff won't grow. So just a warning with it with the tiller, but tillers are great. I used one this year to put in all my buckwheat and things like that. And I wanted to do some weed control.
Yep.
And it does a great job at popping up weeds and stuff. But yeah, it definitely has a place, but I'm really cautious with how much I use it. So.
We're lucky because we bought them before they went crazy in price. I think we only spent like $500 on a brand new one.
Yeah, it was real cheap.
And them some bitches are like $2,000 now.
Oh yeah,
I wouldn't be buying one for $2,000. It wouldn't be worth it to me. But for $500 a couple years ago, it was perfect.
Yep.
We live in oil field country here, so there are a lot of rocks, but I've pulled up pipes in rebar with my tiller before that's in the ground, and it starts doing crazy things. They start smoking. You're trying to slam everything off. You can't figure out what's wrong, and then you get underneath there, and there's a piece of pipe, through the whole thing. So it's I know what you mean with that, but if you're bad,
that's nice. A chisel plow just goes through all that. It doesn't grab that. Right? Like it just zips through rocks.
Yep.
It'll hit them, and that's kind of why I really, really like it a lot.
We have
And I said,
go ahead.
My battery's going dead here. I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good.
Here, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, we can wrap it up. The last thing I was going to say was we got a 6-foot disc a 3-point disc that we pull behind the tractor. I love using that thing because it's heavy.
I use it.
It breaks everything up. I mean, it does a great job. But if your battery's dying, I'm glad we were finally able to get you on. It was a very enjoyable podcast.
Yeah, great conversation.
A lot of great stuff for guys that are looking to get into food plotting or might have a little bit of knowledge and are looking to, just take that next step. You're definitely one of the guys to come to for advice, and we'll be able to reference this for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
We very much appreciate it. Good luck killing one of those early season bucks. If you get mad towards the end of the year and you need us to come kill a bear, just give us a call because we're 2 hours away and we love shooting bears.
Yes. Yep. Stay in touch for sure. Just give me a call. But I appreciate you guys having me and anytime. It's always fun to talk hunting and obviously love talking food plots too. So thanks for having me.
Yep. We appreciate it. Good luck. I'll send you the links to when this is available. We do Monday releases, so I'll send you all that stuff. And
everybody, thanks for listening.
Yeah, we appreciate
Deer Shot Podcast, and we are out.
Out.